Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson. Newcastle welcome Brighton to St James's Park on Saturday for a good old 3 p.m. kickoff as the Premier League returns after the international break. John, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm very, very well. Looking forward to the real world returning because England's all well and good, but it's all about the Premier League and Newcastle United. So I'm well chuffed that we're getting back into the real world.
Well, let me ask you about England and the recent appointment of Thomas Tuchel. Everyone's got their opinion on it. Your thoughts on it?
I'm glad it's not Eddie Howe. That's my first thought about it. It means we keep Eddie Howe. Now we've only got to see off Amanda and Spurs from trying to nick him possibly sometime in the future. Is it a good appointment? Well, I'm not certain. I'm not certain. But who is perfect outside of Pep? If you're taking a foreign manager, and he would be by far the best. Who is perfect? You could say Thomas Tuchel's won all sorts of things everywhere, but he's very confrontational. It's very emotive. If you want to look on the black side, and there's always people that do, you can say, well, he got the sack at Chelsea and he got the sack at Bayern Munich. But he is a winner. He is a winner, and that is something. Um, but quite frankly, I mean, I love England. I'm loyal to my country, but my heart's Newcastle United. And the first thing I thought about his appointment is that's wonderful. Can we stop talking about Eddie Howe and disrupting our situation, which has been disrupted and is will continue to be disrupted over the Spurs thing? It seems like outsiders, and I'm not talking about people in the northeast, just don't want us to be successful, don't want us to challenge at the top. So let's stir the pot. And it's been easy recently with the business with Paul Mitchell and Amanda leaving and everything to stir the Eddie Howe pot. And we've lost one thing there, which is the England job. If we can just put Spurs to bed and Amanda to bed in terms of she would go for Eddie, and we could all follow why she might do that. But she isn't even in at Spurs yet. Let's forget all about that. Let us look after our own destiny. So the greatest feeling I've got about Thomas Tuchel getting the job is that it's not Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I can share that. And I'm not too worried about Spurs at all. But I agree. Let's stop talking about that. But one thing we will not stop talking about is our new sponsor, NORD VPN. And John's just come back from a few days away. And what you might not know about John is that even though he goes on holiday quite often and he's earned it in his long career, he always takes his laptop so he doesn't miss out on any of the big news, and he always files his column on time as well. That is commitment that few people have. But one thing I bet he doesn't have is NordVPN, and he definitely should have it because NordVPN protects you from scammers who can get into your laptop and your phone when you're on public Wi-Fi. It just offers you a real secure bit of security when you are anywhere in the world. And there's loads of benefits with it as well. And I really do recommend anyone listening to this, anyone watching this, and to John as well, to take us up on our special offer with NordVPN and get this downloaded on your laptop, on your phone. There's a host of other benefits as well. For instance, if you go away, and unfortunately we won't be going away in Europe this season, but hopefully next year, you can actually book hotels in foreign countries by changing the location on your NordVPN app and getting them a little bit cheaper, because who doesn't love a bargain after all? So, John, now I've described to you the benefits of NordVPN, and I use it. I used it in Dortmund last season. It was a real kind of, added security, as I say, and it just made me feel a little bit easier with what I was doing. Do you think it's something you might end up getting?
Oh, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, I'm an insomniac, but with that, I think I would sleep at night because technology is a wonderful thing. I've gone from sort of being in a situation when I first covered Newcastle United, going down to Leeds United, where they didn't even have phones in the press box, and having to have kids run down with written copy to phone it across on an open line to get in the football ping. I've gone from that to what it is today. But the great thing about technology now, and I'm all for it, is that you are vulnerable to all sorts of things that can happen to you. And that turns me cold. That really turns me cold. And being able to sleep at night and feel comforted by something like this, terrific, terrific. bring it on. I shall be signing up as soon as this is over.
Fantastic. Well, to get the best discount off your Nord VPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/tune. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. So pop down there, click the link, sign up. It'll be well worth your time. And it is one of the best offers around that you will get, and you will be protected. Once again, thank you to NordVPN for coming on board. It is much appreciated. And I can say from personal preference, this is the VPN that you should be signing up to. It's the VPN that I've used for a good few years now. It is well worth your time and money. Get the special offer down and you won't regret it. And we're going to look ahead now to the visit of Brighton to St James's Park, a good old 3 p.m. kickoff. I do love a good old 3 p.m. kickoff. Maybe I'm an old romantic, John, but there's just something that I just enjoy about rocking up at St James's Park at 3 p.m. You know, it's not on television anywhere. But Brighton, difficult opposition. They started the season really well. They kind of tailed off a little bit, but they've picked up again. They've conceded a few goals, but they've also scored quite a few as well. Last time out, they beat Spurs 3-2, despite being 2-0 down at one point in the game. How would you view Brighton? Because a lot of people thought they would be, I don't know, it was interesting because last season people thought they'd do much better than they actually did. Then they've changed manager. This manager's come in, he's very young. Maybe a lot of people didn't know about him. How would you view them?
Very, very interesting. I mean, I think we've got 3 major matches coming up in the Premier League. Brighton at home, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home. If it's not make or break, it feels like it to me because, you know, if we do well in all those 3 teams are currently above Newcastle. Brighton, albeit just on goal difference, but they're currently above Newcastle, who are in 7th place. If we are to confirm our European credentials, we've got to get a reasonable number of points out of those 3 games. If we don't, then we're whistling in the wind as far as the Champions League's concerned, or even the minor European competitions. Now, if you look at Brighton at home, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, the most winnable is Brighton because Chelsea happens to be away from home and Arsenal is tough anyway. The most winnable is Brighton. They're a wonderful club. They're the great pretenders, if you like, of the Premier League for me, because they threaten all the big city teams up at the top of the league, while selling all their major assets and their top managers. They let them all go. They find new managers, they find new players, and they terrify teams above them. They never quite do what they suggest they're going to do, which is blast everybody apart and go in the top 4, like Newcastle United did 2 seasons ago and Aston Villa did last season. They never quite get that far, but they're a danger. They threaten. Every neutral loves them because they play good football. And they punch well above their weight as a small town club. Um, I think I think if you get at them, they give you a chance. If you get at them, they're vulnerable. If you don't get at them, they'll pass you to death. But if you get at them, they're vulnerable. They've punched above their weight. They've produced loads of players they've sold on. And by the way, the one that they'll be looking to sell on next at a profit will be Minteh that they got from Newcastle. And by the way, that's nightmarish. That his first game at St James's Park is not for Newcastle United, but is for Brighton at St James's Park. That is frightening, and that's down to Lewis Hall to put him in his back pocket. In talking of back pockets, I worry about him running off the back of Lewis Hall, who's wonderful going forward, not so clever defending. Um, they are danger. They are danger. Underestimate them. Don't start quickly. Be a little bit complacent, and they'll make you pay. But they are we've got more chance of getting 3 points against Brighton than we have at Chelsea because they're flying at the moment, and home to Arsenal, who are tough anyway. Them in Man City. So it if we have 3 big games coming up, let's take it step by step. The first one's Brighton, and that'll set the mood. If we win, it'll set the mood. If we draw, or heaven forbid, if we lose, it'll set the wrong mood.
Well, unfortunately, from a Newcastle United point of view, Brighton really do seem to like to face the Magpies. They've only lost 2 of their 14 Premier League games against Newcastle United, although those defeats did come at St James's Park, and Newcastle at the moment are unbeaten in the last 3 Premier League home games against Brighton. So hopefully they can make that 4. You mentioned there Yankuba Minteh. That's the man everyone's talking about. I was trying to think, John, before we came on air. Can you remember a situation like this where there's been such fear, such I'm not going to say the word anger, but there's been such close a look at such a player that we never actually saw play in black and white?
I mean, the whole situation's crazy. It never happened before because in the old days, and by the way, the old days, I'm just talking about 3 or 4 years ago, and not 130 years. In the old days, you didn't buy somebody and then be forced to sell them so that you didn't get deducted 10 points. I mean, financial fair play, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, you buy somebody and then you've got to sell him or you've got to sell somebody, and it happens to be him because he's wanted, along with Elliot Anderson. You've got to sell somebody just to make the books balance. It is absolutely crazy. And he's got to have talent. We've got to think he has talent, else we wouldn't have bought him in the first place. He is blisteringly quick. And isn't it ironic, Andrew, that we buy him, he never plays for us, we sell him, and we're looking for an outside right. And he's an outside right. It is absolutely crazy. And we do fear him because Brighton have a history of buying, and I'm not going to say cheap because he wasn't cheap, but buying and making money on who they buy. And this guy could do that. And by Jove, this fella will want to play well up here, won't he? I mean, we know that. We don't have to. By Jove, will this match mean something to him? And he's blisteringly quick. Um, Now, Lewis Hall's been fabulous recently, and Lewis Hall going forward's terrific. The only trouble is if he loses the ball going forward and somebody pops it over the top, Minter's away on his bike, isn't he? I'm just hoping that he doesn't showcase his talents and show to us why we bought him at St James's Park. And I hope Lewis Hall, because the last game we had up here, Hall didn't do well just going forward. He did well overall, and he played well against them. And I want that to happen again. But it's quite the most amazing situation I've ever known. I mean, I've covered Newcastle United and I've watched them since the 50s, and I've never known we buy somebody, have them for a year, never played for us, and then sold them to another club, and then he straight away comes back here. It is a product of today's stupidity, the financial fair play situation. It really is very, very stupid. And I just hope it doesn't come home to haunt us.
I think it's made even more irritating, as you mentioned, by the fact Newcastle United are really missing a right winger who can just give that end
Absolutely.
product. And I think the other really interesting thing is you look at the other players that they've got around. Under this manager, you've got the likes of Danny Welbeck, who's just seemingly had a bit of a rebirth, and we shouldn't really be sitting here worried about a 33-year-old Danny Welbeck causing Newcastle United trouble. But I am. I don't think Newcastle's defence, for all they've done reasonably well in the last few games, I do worry with the speed of Mint down the flank, probably Minotona down the other flank, and then Danny Welbeck in one of the best forms of his life in the opening weeks of this season. I am a little bit fearful of Brighton's forward three.
Sure. I mean, I wish Danny Welbeck was our backup striker to Alexander Isak. Um, and he always could play. I mean, he was at Man United, he was at Spurs, who played for England. What he doesn't do, Andrew, if you look at his recent record, he doesn't score a pile of goals. He scores goals, but he doesn't score a pile of goals. I think in the last few seasons he hasn't reached double figures, or he's just reached double figures. He doesn't score a lot of goals, but of course that doesn't mean he won't score against Newcastle United. He is a quality player who has been done by injuries, but in no way done as much as Callum Wilson has been. Um, he is to fear. But I take a leaf out of Joe Harvey's book, which was, let's forget about the opposition and fear them. Let them fear us. Let us concentrate on us. Let them fear Isaac. Let them fear Gordon instead of us fearing Welbeck and us fearing Minteh. Let them fear us because we've got good players. I mean, if we go around all the time talking up the opposition we've got, and it's very easy because it's Premier League opposition, we'll never sleep at night. We've got good players. Let them think, blinking heck, is Isaac going to come back? 25 goals last season, silky feet, Rolls Royce, he'll be trouble. Anthony Gordon on the wing, why, what a player he is. In midfield, Bruno, Tonali, and Big Joe, blimey, we're in trouble. Let them think that. Rather than
Yeah,
us worry about Welbeck and Minteh.
there you go. My fears absolutely just thrown out the window there with that speech. But no, I agree. We've got to talk up the assets that Newcastle United got, and we will do in a few moments' time. But I think just on Minteh, finally, the really bizarre thing is that Newcastle United were forced to sell a potential future of the Premier League, future star in the Premier League, because of the PSR rules. And following Man City's claimed legal victory, one of the elements they won on was the fact that interest-free shareholder loans will now or are due to be charged when it comes to PSR accounts. At the moment, they've been interest-free, which now will look like Brighton, along with the likes of Arsenal and a few other clubs, Everton, are going to have to suddenly find 60, 70 million for whenever these rules are changed. And that just doesn't sit right, because they always should have been charged at whatever, 6, 8% on your accounts, and they weren't, allowing Brighton to have healthy accounts, and we applaud them because they are a very well-run club. But actually what they were allowed to do was pick on Newcastle's vulnerabilities, get a potential massive star of the future, and leave Newcastle United down in assets. Newcastle United was struggling around and had to effectively, they were forced to sell. And in reality, Brighton probably shouldn't have been allowed to buy Minteh, because they needed, or they should have been charged 60, 70 million pounds on top of their accounts.
I mean, do you ever, I mean, you're a young lad, but do you ever wish for the old simple days when you could just buy anybody you could afford, and unless you went bankrupt, you just got on with life? And I mean, they were simple days when you lived by what you were. If you were a big city club and you got 50,000 fans, you could afford a bit more than if you're Bournemouth with 11,000. But that was about what it was. And I mean, when you think of the huge takeovers that initially happened when Abramovich moved into Chelsea and Man City got the oil money from the Arabs, they didn't have the restrictions Newcastle United have got. I mean, football is now being played Monday to Friday in the banks and in the financial corridors of the game, and not on the football field. I mean, can you, Joe Harvey would be scratching his head sitting here now and being told, well, we should look at this and this is percentage of that, and should this really happen? For goodness sake, you can either afford a player or you can't afford a player. Can we get on? And I know it's to stop big money buying clubs, but it's the way of the world, isn't it? If somebody with a lot of money wants to buy a smaller Premier League club like Bournemouth and Brighton, good luck to them for that as well. And Brighton have shown they can survive in this world. I mean, I'm getting exasperated now when I'm spending my Monday to Friday working out the financial chessboard of the Premier League instead of talking about football. And then on Saturday watching football, but then having an absolute panic on June the 30th when Newcastle have got to sell somebody, anybody, not to have 10 points deducted. Where on earth are we going? Where is the simple facts of life? And actually, the Newcastle takeover, to a great extent, is what sparked all this. Let's shut doors and let's slam doors and let's not have things happen that could happen previously and did happen under Abramovich and the guys that moved in at Man City. I mean, I get bored shackless sometimes over the football. Say, can we please go back to days when, if I'm willing to spend two and tuppence jeg on a player, then I spend two and tuppence jeg, and that's it. And if I get it wrong, I'm skint, and if I get it right, Newcastle go up the league a couple of places. I mean, it really has become a nonsense, and it's become a situation where the team is not run by Eddie Howe anymore. The team's run by the financial people that tell Eddie Howe you can't have Minteh and Elliot Anderson anymore because they've got to go, and you can't buy this fella because it costs too much in the financial fair play. I mean, managers used to run things, and fans used to have a very simple idea. How many fans thoroughly understand at the moment what each and every club can do financially?
Well, this is it. I'm in favour of some sort of financial protection because we don't want to see clubs end up like Leeds United, for example, and where they spend well above their means and have to fall down the leagues. But I just think there's too many rules. It's too complicated. Once you think you've understood one rule, there's another rule, and it's just all over the place. I think the Premier League have proved they're very hasty without really thinking of the consequences, without putting a proper plan in. Manchester City mentioned that in their legal counsel. And in a way, I'm quite glad that the emergency meeting, which was scheduled for this week, has been postponed, because I'm hoping that means that there's actually going to be some proper planning and thinking ahead before anything's put on the table. Because the last thing we want is any rules coming in which benefit Newcastle or not, but actually turn out in a year's time, 18 months' time, where we're back with another club suing the Premier League again because they've just rushed in and tried to change it to calm the fire that City have started burning. So I think there just needs to be a bit of time, bit of reflection, and hopefully the right plans are put in place for the Premier League. I'm not necessarily thinking about Newcastle's benefit, but let's just think about it before we do. But let's get back to matters on the pitch. Brighton have got a very young manager, Fabian Hertzler, 31 years of age at the time of appointment. I'm just wondering, John, what does that do for the dressing room dynamic when you are Danny Welbeck and you're 33, when you're James Milner and you're 37? I mean, you must have to have good man management. You must have to have the right ideas and a good CV to back it up as well, because you look at James Milner, he's won everything under the sun, and you're coming in 6 years, you're his junior, and telling them how to get better and better.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, or even worse than telling him how to get better and better, telling him what he's not doing right and he better pull up his socks. You see Miller saying, "Wait a minute, son. Oh, can I call you son? Put your medals on the table." It is very difficult when things are going well, and by Brighton standards, and I'm not being patronising, I'm being realistic. By Brighton standards, things are going well. They're sixth in the table or whatever. When it's going well like that, it doesn't matter what age a man is. Everything's hunky dory. It's when things don't go well. When they lose three games on the trot, if they lose three games on the trot, and all of a sudden a young manager is blasting some of his senior players that are all their name, and they are capable of turning around and saying, "What do you know? I've seen twice as much as you've seen in your life, mate. Don't have a go at me." And that happens in football. That happens, and that's when the problems occur. I think you can manage at that age and I really don't want to be patronising by talking about smaller clubs or lesser cities or lesser Premier League sides. You can do it, but you couldn't do it at Manchester United. You couldn't do it at Liverpool. You couldn't do it at Arsenal, and you couldn't do it at Newcastle United. If Newcastle United had a 31-year-old manager telling superstars what they're doing wrong, etc., without having the clout, then I think it would be very, very difficult. It suits this situation. And well done, Brighton. They continue to lose managers and they continue to find good ones. And well done them. But it is an amazing situation. It's not even as if he's a 31-year-old who's done everything in this country, like, say, a young Lampard or a young Gerrard or somebody comes into management where they think, well, he's done it, seen it, done everything. This is a guy plucked out of the air who's from Germany via America via with no history over here and telling you what to do. Now, if you get results, he can tell you because it's wonderful and they're doing great. The time will come is if they lose 3 or 4 on the trot and he's then bawling out senior pros who might just turn and say, "Listen, pal, I've seen more than you know." it is a problem. But at the moment, good luck to him. I hope it works after Saturday. I hope it works, and it's a breath of fresh air to have new people come in. But there is a difficulty in it. You'll never get somebody as young as that suddenly managing Arsenal or Man City or Man United.
Yeah, and I applaud the appointment. I think it is, as you say, a breath of fresh air to see clubs taking a gamble. I mean, of course, to them they would have done their homework, and it's a well informed appointment. But it's like the chat with Sporting Lisbon, who could become the next Man City manager. Hugo Viana brought him to Lisbon after only 2.5 months of top flight Portuguese experience as manager. I think it was Braga. Cost him 10 million quid. I mean, it's worked out all right because he's won the Portuguese league, and he probably will end up following Viana to the Etihad. But it's gambles like that which you sometimes do applaud teams for taking, although it might be a bigger a gamble for City. But
By the way, I wouldn't like to follow Pep at Man City, the same as I wouldn't like to follow Fergie at Man United or Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. I tell you what, if our old friend Viana brings across him to take over from Pep, all I say is good luck, Bonnie lad. Good luck. You'll need it.
Yeah, it'd be certainly an interesting replacement indeed. And just a final word on Brighton. I mean, it looks like João Pedro, who Newcastle United fans will know because Newcastle came very close to signing him before he ended up at Brighton. He's had a good start of the season, but he's injured, so he probably will be missing, I think, on Saturday. You got Rutter, who really struggled for Leeds in the Premier League. But he found his feet in the Championship. He's kind of had a Joe Linton kind of moment, and obviously they've had that shared experience of the clubs they've played for, and they're the same nationality, I think, as well, aren't they? I might be wrong on that, but they've definitely played for the same club. No, Rutter is he's French. Beg my pardon, but the experience they've got in that side. Now, you mentioned there that you wouldn't mind seeing, or you wouldn't mind if seeing Welbeck as a backup. James Milner could obviously still offer something. Do you think Newcastle maybe lack that experience of those kind of players? I mean, you think about what they've got at the moment: Kieran Trippier, Fabian Schär, Dan Burn. I suppose when you look at it, with everyone fit, would Welbeck get into a Newcastle United starting 11? No. Would James Milner? No. But that sometimes that older voice on the touchline is still very important.
No, not in their case. I don't think it is at all. I think we've got a lot of older people. Quite me. Until recently, we had Richie and Dummett with everybody else. We had far too many people that were wonderful in the dressing room but never got on the pitch. I don't think Milner, who's been one of the greatest professionals we've ever seen in this country, would have absolutely anything to offer Newcastle United right now, because he's well past his sell-by date. And by the way, I've got nothing but admiration from in the career he's had. Is quite wonderful, and his dedication to keeping fit, etc., etc. But he wouldn't give us one solitary single thing. Neither would Welbeck get anywhere near the team. I just mean he would be better. All I'm saying with Welbeck is he would be better backup than Callum Wilson to Isaac. But that is all. That is all, and only just better because he's had injury problems as well, Welbeck. But he would be ahead of Asula, his backup, and he would be better than Gordon playing centre forward when Isaac was out of the team. But no, I don't think Newcastle need any experience or that. I think there's just certain positions that Newcastle United are short in, which is a centre forward. It's amazing to say we're short of a goalkeeper when we've got five, isn't it? But I think we're short of a backup goalkeeper to Pope, and we're short of a right-sided centre half. We're short in certain positions, but I don't think their seasoned players would give us anything. I would only take Welbeck ahead of Wilson because very occasionally he might be able to actually stand up and get out on the pitch.
Well, you mentioned there his goal scoring record, Danny Welbeck. He's actually never hit double figures for Brighton since he's been there. He's been there since the 2020-21 season. And this season, he scored 4 and 7. He scored 5 last season, 6 the season before, 6 the season before that, 6 the season before that. So he's never hit double figures, although he has started the season rather well. We'll focus on some of Newcastle United stuff because go on, John.
That's what I was saying, Andrew, about Welbeck early on when you were saying, we naturally fear good players, etc., etc. I was saying, actually, off the top of my head, his goal scoring record isn't good, and it hasn't been. We can see him, and I saw him recently on the telly score a wonderful goal, and it reminded you of him in his pomp at Manchester United and with England, etc. But he doesn't score a lot of goals. There's no question. His link-up play is terrific as well, but he's not a natural goal scorer. Like Isaac got 25 last season. He's never going to do that again. He'll be lucky if he scores 25 goals in the rest of his career, given his age and his injury record. Never mind in one season. But he is a quality footballer who has suffered through injuries. But I'm not going to worry about them. I'm not worried about Brighton. I'm worried about Chelsea away, and I'm worried about Arsenal at home. But I'm not worried about Brighton, as long as we get it right. What I'm worried about more than Brighton is I'm worried about us, Andrew. I'm worried
Hmm.
about
Well,
us getting it right. That is the question we've all got to ask ourselves. Will we get it right? Will we be front foot? Will we keep it going for an hour and a half? Will we score goals? Will we have Isaac? All the questions are about us. Never mind Brighton. All the questions for me are about us.
well, we saw against Everton that defensively Newcastle United were quite good. Eddie Howe was very impressed with what they offered at the back. It was just going forward that they failed to take their chances. Obviously, Gordon missed the penalty and another chance in the second half, which he really should have put away. Do you agree with Eddie Howe's viewpoint that all the elements are kind of there? They're just kind of waiting for it to click. And do you think it'll happen on Saturday?
That's a great question. That's manager speak, and that's not having a go at Eddie. The manager's got to say that. The manager can't come out and say we were absolutely brilliant for 2/3 of the pitch and we're rubbish up in the final third, because people are going to turn around and say, "Well, you bought the players and we can't buy any more to January. So what's going to happen now, matey?" So we are waiting for it to click, but we've got to. We can't just wait until the day it happens. And Eddie won't be waiting. He'll be doing his work on the training ground to make certain it happens. There's a very simple answer to it. We need Isaac back. I'm not meaning that he's going to make the whole difference and suddenly we're going to get five, but the whole forward line is going to look better. The whole attacking option is going to look better. He's silky smooth. He can score goals. And by the way, it releases Gordon from a position which is not natural for him, false nine, to the wing, which is totally natural for him. So we benefit with two players. Isaac comes back, we benefit with Isaac and Gordon. So there's a huge difference. If the front line of Newcastle's only three, two players are in two positions are improved immediately by Isaac's return, and that's centre forward in either outside left or outside right. So that is what is needed. Um, the rest of the time, we've got to get more clinical. We've got to get goals from midfield. We've got to get goals from out wide. And we can't just wait and hope it comes back. We've got to work on it to make it happen. But we're paying for not having a good backup to Isaac at centre forward. We're paying for that. There's no question about that. That could cost us Europe yet. And we've got to hope that Isaac is back against Brighton, because we need him double quick. We need him not just because he's a good player, but because we've got nobody else.
Yeah, well, there is hope that both Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak will be back on Saturday, although that's not been confirmed by the club. And as usual, Eddie Howe probably won't give too much away in his Friday press conference, but we can keep everything crossed. If Isak is back, John, and he's declared fit, is there any question that he starts?
Absolutely none whatsoever. Absolutely none whatsoever. He'll be the first on the team sheet. It'll be Isaac and 10 others, to have a famous phrase that was once said. And it's not that's not the strength of Newcastle. I don't mean it disparagingly. I just mean we need a centre forward. There's no question that Isaac starts. There's also no question that Callum Wilson doesn't, or Lewis Miley, if he was fit, doesn't, because they've never played since last season, either of them. And they're not capable. They haven't played pre-season even. They haven't got any games in since last season ended, and they would be lucky to come off the bench for a quarter of an hour. of a match when they first come back, whether it's against Brighton or it's against Chelsea, in either of the double headers with Chelsea or Arsenal at home. They aren't in a situation to start. Isaac is in a situation to start. He mightn't be at his sharpest, but he's still got to start.
With Callum Wilson, if again he's past fit to play, but he's not match fit, as you said, because how can he be? Would you put him on the bench? Because on one hand, it gives you a massive boost when you see both your strikers back, if that is what happens. But then if you're 1-0 down and you're chasing the game with 20 minutes to go, do you really risk someone as fragile as him? Because people will go, well, then what's the point of having him on the bench if you don't risk him? But then I could also see the viewpoint of saying, well, is he actually really ready to get involved in a physical battle against Lewis Dunk or Adam Webster, whoever it is? There's a dilemma there for Eddie Howe. I mean, do you keep Callum Wilson back for a few more weeks until he's definitely ready for that physical battle?
When is he going to be ready for a physical battle? He collapsed in Germany when there was no physical battle. It was just training. I mean, if you wait for Callum, bless him, and I've talked many times about what a wonderful striker he is when he's 100%. So I'm not degrading the boy. But, I mean, when is Callum Wilson ready and not a risk? Never. Never. He's always a risk. Every footballer is a risk, but he's more of a risk. He will never be ready with certainty to be on the bench. You've just got to put. If he is as fit as he's going to get, he's got to go on the bench. And you can give him quarter of an hour, or you can give him 10 minutes. Or if you're winning 3-0, you don't give him anything. But when is he going to be a nailed on certainty? He's not a nailed on certainty. The lad has got injury problems, whether he likes it or not, whether Eddie likes it or not, or whether we like it or not. He's never going to be a nailed on. He's always a risk of some sort. But I mean, if you're paying him thousands of pounds a week, at some stage you want his derriere sitting on the bench, and then you want his legs to take him onto the pitch, because that is the name of the game. And by the way, his contract's up at the end of this season, so there ain't much time for him to prove anything. He's a lovely, lovely lad who is great in the dressing room. He's got a wonderful smile, lifts people's spirits, and he can half play when he's fit. They're all the pluses. The minuses we already know. But we've got to take a risk. It's always a risk. If we hold him for a fortnight to Arsenal, we'll be sitting here and you'll be saying to me, will it be a risk? He hasn't played yet. Will it be a risk to bring Callum on against Arsenal? It'll always be a risk to bring Callum on. At some stage, that risk has got to be taken, as long as it's calculated, as long as he's close. And it will be calculated, because Callum won't take a chance on his fitness. He won't take a chance if he feels wrong. And Eddie's been very, very cautious with him. I mean, when did we last see him? Apart from 9 minutes on the last day of last season, we haven't seen him for an eternity. So we are cautious with him, but we can't be too cautious. There will be a risk whenever he goes on the pitch. This week, next week, sometime never. It'll be a risk.
Well, fingers crossed he's back sooner rather than later, because Newcastle United certainly do need him. We had quite a few stars away on international duty over the last fortnight. We had Bruno playing against Peru on Tuesday. Brazil scored 4 against Peru. Guimaraes played 79 minutes in that game. You had Almiron, who played 75 minutes against Ecuador, and then played a further 80 minutes against Venezuela, earning his 62nd cap for his country. You had Lewis Hall in the under-21 squad, played the full 90 minutes against Ukraine, and then came on as a second-half substitute against Azerbaijan on Tuesday in the 71st minute. Elliot Anderson netted in that game and also was named player of the match, which is lovely to see from his point of view, but I can't help but think Newcastle may come to regret that sale. Sula played against Slovakia. Did he for the next European Cup? Sorry, played against Iceland on Tuesday, which I think the Danes won. And then you had Sandro Tonali featuring against Israel. and you had Emil Kraft as well featuring for Sweden. So, I mean, out of them, John, you've got obviously Bruno, Lewis Hall, and Tonali, who we would think would be nailed on starters for Saturday.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. The others, fine, but they're not gonna start. And out of that lot, fitness is what's important. I mean, I think Hall will play left back, not Kelly, and will face Minteh. Tonali and Bruno will be in the middle of the park with Big Joe, I would think. And hopefully Gordon from his back from England will be up front. Almiron won't be. Tonali, I want to see unleashed. I mean, the, if you look at Tonali having a 10-month suspension, the attitude to him at club and country level has been totally different. At club level, Eddie has gone down the line of let's be cautious, let's not burn him out, let's not overexpose him to injury or fatigue after 10 months out. And we've been very cautious. We didn't start him for a while, then we started him a little bit. Italy have been the exact opposite. They've had 4 games. He started all 4. In 3 of them, he's played the whole 90 minutes. In the other, he only got subbed in the last 10. They've just put him full frontal back in, and he's not only played well, he's got rave notices. He's got rave notices. And they've talked about his running power in the 90th minute. And by the way, you know why he's got running power in the 90th minute? Because he trains with Newcastle United, who make certain you've got running power in the 90 minutes in your legs because that's the way we play. The Italians, who are slower than a snail, play a totally different game and are staggered at this fella running up and down the park like a Lindy because of the fitness he's got here. Now, if he can play like that for them and has that passion, he is wanting to make up for lost time. He's had 10 months taken out of his career, and while he's a young man and therefore he's got a lot ahead of him, that's still a long time out. Let us not wrap him up in cotton wool. Let us unleash him. I mean, on the international stage, he's played 3 90 minutes and another 80 minutes on top, and has been the best player and has been lauded by the press and the manager out there. I tell you what, stick him in with Bruno and Joe Linton, both sides of him, and let him get at Brighton and let him play the 90 minutes and let him play the 90 minutes against Chelsea away and Chelsea at home and Arsenal at home. He's wanting to play. He needs to play. What have we been cautious about? We've run out of cotton wool to put round him. He doesn't need cotton wool. He hasn't been injured. We're not protecting an injury. Coming back from a long-term injury where you try to protect somebody, he hasn't been injured. He's just been unavailable. And what he's done for Italy has been mind-boggling. Back in his own country, he's Superman. Here, it's belt and braces. Let's not go belt and braces. He's a quality player. We paid 52, going up to 55 million from, and we haven't been able to use him virtually at all until now. Let's get our money back. Let him go. Let him be happy. Let him play. He's integrated into the club. He's got a great attitude now. He believes he owes the Tyneside public and the football club, etc., etc. Let him go. He's a young boy. He's only 24. What's he need a rest for? He's 24, for goodness sake, and he's never had an injury. Let him go for 90 minutes and let him go for 90 minutes in the next 4 games.
Yeah, I think many people will agree with you. And the rest of the team, maybe Jacob Murphy / Miguel Almiron is a questionable one. I don't think either have nailed that place down in the team. But are you sticking with Jacob Murphy?
Well, no, it's an interesting situation, Andrew. If you take up front, let us presume for one moment Isaac is fit, because that's the hope and that's the desire of everybody. 2 of the 3 up top is Isaac and Gordon then. Now, it just depends if Gordon plays in his England position of outside left or whether he plays outside right so Barnes can play outside left. Or do we play Jacob Murphy or Almiron. Um, Barnes, I've been disappointed with recently. I think he's a terrific goal scorer. I think he finishes exceptionally well when he cuts inside. But you know, when you take his goals away from me and you look at the rest of the game, you sometimes think, what did he do? What did he do? He finishes brilliantly, but he hasn't taken games by the scruff of the neck and imposed himself on the games. So I think the only thing that will be in Eddie's mind is, does he switch Gordon to outside right and play Bonds, or does he play Gordon in his preferred position of outside left, which is where I prefer him, in which case he plays Murphy. I mean, Almiron's as far back as Hadrian's Wall. I mean, he doesn't come into the equation whatsoever.
I think if Isaac's fit, I think it will be one of Miggy or Murphy. I'm not really sure who. I don't agree with quite your verdict on Miggy there, but I do think it'll be one of them on the right and Gordon on the left. And I think Barnes will drop to the bench because with as much faith as I've got in him, I agree he's been lacking a little bit, but I'm still confident he will come good.
By
Now,
the way,
when we spoke about
your membership of Mickey's fan club isn't suddenly being reinstated there, has it? With you suddenly thinking that he could play outside right? I mean, we've seen him as often as we've seen a Dodo and Jesmond Dean this season. What makes you think he's suddenly going to become our saviour at outside right?
because I don't think Murphy sees that opportunity. I mean, I've been impressed with him in certain games, but I just think Eddie Howe's not set on one of them, and it just reaffirms what we've been saying all summer long. That well, not even just all summer long, but for the last year and a bit, that they need that right wing. I mean, if they'd had,
Oh,
and someone can
desperately,
ring the bell for
desperately,
the name
Andrew.
I'm going to mention, but if they'd had Brian and Burma in, we wouldn't even be having this discussion because he'd be in on
No.
that right side. So, you know, there we go. You said before the Everton game, John, that it was a must-win because of the games coming up. Now, Everton held Newcastle to a 0-0 draw. What is this game in terms of the games coming up? You've briefly alluded to it, but does the fact that they drew against Everton make this even more of a must-win for Newcastle in many ways?
Well, Newcastle held Newcastle to a draw at Everton. I don't think Everton did. I think we almost not beat ourselves, but we were the reason we didn't win because we couldn't finish. I mean, we dominated them so much that the percentage numbers, and I think it was 10 corners against none. The stats, your favourite phrase, the stats, which I tend to ignore sometimes and shouldn't, but the stats showed how dominating we were in that game. We tripped over ourselves. Everton didn't do it for us. Although the Mackham didn't do us any favours saving Gordon's penalty, but I don't think Gordon should have took it because he had time to think about it. And with the crowd and with him being back at Everton, I would have preferred Shaw to take it. I think that was the one game. I thought he played well in the game, but he played well instinctively. On the penalty, he had time to think about it, and I think he psyched himself out of the penalty. Shaw wouldn't have done so. I wish Shaw had taken the penalty. I'm not going to say Brighton's must win because I'm sick of saying must win. But let's put it another way. As I said right at the start of this podcast, of the next three games in the Premier League, all of whom are against sides currently above us, Brighton, Chelsea, and Arsenal, Brighton for me is the most winnable of the three. It's at home, and so I think it is very, very important, especially after losing 2 points at Everton, because we'll stay seventh or might get to sixth if we don't start winning some of these games. We've got to turn some of the draws into wins to make certain we climb. Otherwise, we stay about where we are. In seventh at the end of last season, which is where we are now, was looked upon as a very disappointing finish. So we've got to improve. And if we supposing we lost at Chelsea and drew at home to Arsenal, heaven forbid, but those two results are possible. Those two results are possible. Then we need the 3 points against Brighton, don't we, to balance out with those results. I'm not meaning that will happen in the Chelsea and Arsenal game. We're capable at home of beating anybody on a day. It is more than possible. And Chelsea can hit one of those days where they're stifled as well. So that is not going to happen. But I mean, would you agree? Brighton, Chelsea away, and Arsenal. Brighton is the most winnable of those three.
I would. I think all three of them are really difficult games. And I think, from my point of view, Brighton are a rival to Newcastle in terms of those European spots. Even if we talk about the top four, I think Brighton will be, maybe under their breaths, whispering that that is a realistic possibility. So Newcastle United, in the same way that we said, if you've got European aspirations and you have to be beating teams like Bournemouth and you have to be beating teams like Everton, you also have to be beating teams that are around you battling for the same thing. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I certainly think Brighton are going to be wanting and aiming for the same seat at the table as Newcastle.
I think they will be aiming for that. And I said early doors that I think they're fighting a lot of big clubs to death. But I also think they fall short. I think they've got their only chance of getting into Europe is if they hire a boat on the south coast and go across the channel in a boat. I don't think they're going to make the Champions League as long as Fiddler's got an elbow. No, but that doesn't make them any less of a very, very good side and extremely dangerous and extremely good to watch. But you know what? They can't do that for 38 games, mate. That's the difference. They look good and then they look horrible. And have you noticed, you look over the results last season and the season before, they take some big coffins. I think Newcastle give them one last season, 4-1. They take some big beatings because they're good, they're clever, they're decent. But hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And in a marathon, they will always fall just short. I'm not meaning they won't get into one of the minor European places, which is what they did, but they're never going to make the top four as long as everything's sane. But they are dangerous to a club like Newcastle. No danger about that, and I do admire them hugely. But no, they're not a Champions League side, not a cat in hope. But they are dangerous to us. And if we are not bang on, they'll make us pay on Saturday. We've got to be bang on.
Well, they do concede goals. Conceded 10 goals this season, which is kind of second or third most in the Premier League. It's the most conceded in the top. Let me just scroll down, and I was going to say top 10, but we'll go down a little bit further. It is the most conceded in the top 10. So they are there to be got at, but they do score a few goals themselves as well. But look, Newcastle United are at home, unbeaten. In the last 11 at home, they're just a different animal at home. Teams fear coming to St James's Park, so it's got to be a Newcastle United win, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. For me, it does. And I think it will be. I think this is a game that Newcastle United will win. And if Isaac comes back, I'll think it even more so. Because we'll have a proper side out with a proper number nine. Although he plays it in a very different way from old number nines like Supermac, Wojaki, and Big Alan Shearer. He doesn't play that target bustling, desperate dance sort of centre forward. He doesn't play it that way. He plays it Thierry Henry way. But he is terrific. And it releases Gordon to play outside right, outside on the wing, either side, which is terrific. And by the way, Gordon's much better on the left and right. We only sometimes got to move him across because I can't see Bonds playing right. Um, but it shows how much we need an outside right. Yes, I think that this game is made for Newcastle. We've got to go about it the right way. We've got to go about it the right way. Because if we don't, we get a result like Everton, where we dominate the game, but we don't win. And that's not good enough. That is not good enough. Football's about small margins, and small margins will determine whether you get into Europe or not. Think about last season. Even though we're disappointed with it, Andrew, when the season was finished, we were in Europe, and then Manchester United beat Manchester City in the cup final, and we weren't. It's fine margins, and we've got to eliminate fine margins, and to do that, we've got to get 3 points against Brighton. And I believe we will. Not easily, and not without a quality performance, and not without ability to score goals, but I think we will.
I agree with you. I think Newcastle United will pick up the victory. I think it'll be a very close game. I'm hoping, like Yankuba Minteh doesn't come home and write his own script for Saturday. But I think Newcastle United will get the victory. I'm going to go for kind of a 1-0, but it doesn't matter what the scoreline is, as long as they pick up 3 points. So fingers crossed they do. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again to NORD VPN for sponsoring the podcast. The link for your special order offer for NORD VPN is in the podcast description. Do click on it and go and get your NORD VPN, which will protect you. Thank you to John, as always. And from us two, we will see you next week.